I also wanted to move to DC because obviously Ashley lives there, and Kurt, you spent a lot of time there, and I've certainly spent a lot of my time there as well. And this whole thing with taking over the DC Police Department, sending in the troops, some people will defend it and say, well, the crime is terrible. And even though the numbers are down, how many percent people still don't feel safe? And it's just temporary. And of course, the cynics will say this is just the latest in the authoritarian takeover. And it was LA, now it's DC, then it's going to be other blue cities. I do think if Trump were really serious about this, he would notice that a place like Memphis, Tennessee has the highest crime rate in the country, certainly the highest murder rate. And he might want to send some troops to red cities, but I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. But Ashley, you're the one who lives there now. What are your thoughts on this?
So I've got all sorts of layers here. One, I've lived in the city and in Washington for 25 years. So I have experienced it 100%. Has the crime gotten worse? Absolutely. It's gone down since its peak in 2023, which was horrific. I've had six friends alone with the carjacking issue. I know that, they've been carjacked. So I think that that is the mayor has been working on trying to get that under control. I know that there's a lot of people saying, "Well, the numbers are down and there's only, 1,584, violent crimes," which is rape, murder, and armed robbery. I mean, in my opinion, raising a son in the city, that 1,584 is, like, one too many. So, I think that, the dynamic here, which I think is very interesting that no one is talking about. The mayor has been trying Mayor Bowser has been trying to make these changes for the last 3 years, whether it's the homeless, camps, getting rid of those or, putting them in safe spaces, whether it's the carjacking issue, whether it's crime, whether it's, she's a curfew in place right now for everybody under 17 years old because of, this kinda juvenile groups that were, like, having major attacks in the city with individuals and people that were, in the neighborhoods or on the streets. So, what I think the most interesting dynamic of this is how the mayor has truly walked a fine line. I know that she's welcoming the help of the federal government because city council has been blocking her every step of the way. Obviously, I know that she has said, publicly, we've all seen it, she does welcome some of it, but we don't want to take over. But the city council is so far left and won't let anything happen that I think that in a certain way, this is a welcome. I know it's a welcome opportunity for her as long as it doesn't go too far. Listen, I think 30 days, listen, if 30 days happens, fine, in my opinion. But, I don't think we should, like, go in and change the home rule and all of that. But something needed to give. We couldn't get rid of these homeless sites forever because of city council. By the way, I do feel that people should have a place to live and we have the right services in place as well.
I think that when you look, I try to imagine how would we all feel about this if in 2014 Barack Obama had done the same thing, and if he was also targeting only red states or red cities and making the same argument. The Republicans that I knew back then would say this is an imperial presidency. This is a executive overreach run amok, that this is abuse of power. And I remember when Republicans used to be the small government party and wanted less of a centralized executive branch. That is what used to be one of the central tenets of conservatism, was that government works best when the government that is closest to the people is actually in power. Washington D.C. is always a little goofy because it's not exactly a city state, right? Its budget is actually controlled by Congress. The House Oversight Committee, run by Republicans, has jurisdiction over Washington D.C. Um, and in many ways has more authority than even the city council does, which is something that I discovered when I worked at the oversight committee. I didn't know that part of the legislative portfolio. Ironically, the largest legislative portfolio that the oversight committee has is actually Washington D.C. Nothing else. Uh, I think that when you look at, you kind of have to take everything that's happening and provide a little 50,000 foot level. I see a president who's trying to silence um, criticism and data within the federal government with the firing of the BLS head. I see a president that's activating, military law enforcement personnel only in Democrat-run areas, hiding behind the guise of crime, violence, and homelessness. Uh, 8 of the top 10 cities with the highest murder rates and populations of at least 100,000 are Republicans: Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, Tennessee, Ohio, Louisiana. If this is truly an emergency, which is the basis and predicate in which he's activating the National Guard, then why aren't you doing this in those places as well? If you're doing this in all places that have high violent crime, at least he would be ideologically consistent. What this is purely partisan and headline grabbing and a power flex. And I promise you, if we let him get away with it now, which he is and is going to, when he does it later for other purposes, no one's going to have a leg to stand on to stop. The precedent will already be set. And more we're watching this president systemically dismantle checks and balances and safeguards and jurisdictions to fit his political whims, and it just sounds an awful lot like China and Russia to me. And I don't think it's ever good when you have unchecked executive power running amok, smashing jurisdictions left and right. And that's really what this president is doing, while Congress and Republican majority abdicate responsibilities that they used to hold dear, while the judicial branch gets completely overrun and trampled on by Donald Trump, who really says, if you rule against me, I'm coming for you. Um, this isn't all happening in a vacuum. You have to piece it all together.
Well, and the
I mean,
spinelessness,
Kurt, do you really think? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say the spinelessness of the legislative branch. They have really decided to be a non-participant, just sit on the sidelines. And every time there's a whimper of something, like a stand, for example, Bill Cassidy, I thought he might actually take a stand against RFK. He's probably going to lose his primary anyway. He voted to convict, and he's a doctor, but of course he caved. That awful judge they just confirmed, right? Who was really a January 6th, go by his name, a January 6th conspirator. Tom Tillis, he voted for him. I thought Tom Tillis was going to not run for reelection so he could be a man of principle. It just happens over and over again. And this BLS nominee is yet another chance for them to show some spine. But sadly, I'm not getting my hopes up. Ashley.
Kurt, do you think? I know I was just going to ask Kurt, like, because I know we were pretty much similar on this with the border and that security. Do you think Democrats taking on this anti-crime, which is what Republicans are going to say, whether it's true or not, but that's just how it's going to be messaged. Do you think that's a winning message at the end of the day? Like, take all
No,
emotion out of it.
no,
Yeah.
politically, it's a terrible fight, and Democrats shouldn't take the bait. Like they
And
should
Trump
keep
knows
this
Yeah.
that.
fight right now
Trump
centered.
knows that. Obviously, that's why he's one
Um,
of the reasons he's doing it.
Totally knows that.
He's
oh,
We're not
right.
talking about
he's daring
Epstein
them to
right
come
now,
in.
are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trump should. I mean, Democrats should keep the focus on the economy because that's where Trump is at his most vulnerable, in my opinion. But we should not. I mean, even though it's politically bad, I think it just needs to be pointed out, like, what is being done right now. If any Democrat had done the same thing, Republicans would be losing their minds, calling for impeachments. I mean, I watched Paul Ryan walk down the House floor and call Barack Obama Emperor Obama one time over an executive order he signed that meant nothing. It's just jarring as someone who was on that side, who listened to many of these same Republicans at the time hold hearing after hearing, literally with the title "Executive Overreach, Executive Abuse." When Barack Obama was president, be cheering on this executive power grab that we're seeing from Donald Trump. I'm just making the point that for the Jim Jordans that were there with us at that oversight committee, who are now chairing the Judiciary Committee and cheering on Donald Trump, it is the height of ideological inconsistency and hypocrisy.
And totally selling out on spending. Remember the Freedom Caucus? Ooh, they were going to be so tough on spending. Chip Roy, Jim Jordan, we can't take it. And then they fold like pup tents. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be the economy that brings him down. And I think he's, as is often the case, he's going to be his own worst enemy. But